Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation. And viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, a final look at the legislative session, including a rundown of important environmental bills.
And I think part of what we have to understand is that climate change is not something that can be dealt with soon. It is something that has to be dealt with now.
Plus, the state of theater and local acting as we tentatively poke our heads out of the pandemic. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host, Gene Grant. Last week marked the last day the governor had to sign bills from the legislative session. We'll take a look at her final strokes of the pen, as well as rounding up environmental measures and looking ahead, yes, already, to next year. We'll dip our toe into the special election for the 1st Congressional District, one of the races that's being watched closely from Washington, D.C. We begin, though, with a return to school that's also seen the return of COVID-19. Here's the line. Well, who could have seen this coming? As Albuquerque closed El Dorado High School following a series of rapid response visits for COVID-19 positive tests, APS spokeswoman Monica Armenta said what apparently many people are thinking: we expected this. School's been in session in person for less than 2 weeks, but already schools are shifting to remote learning as cases pop up. Is it a back-to-school blunder or an expected problem to be managed? The Line Opinion panel has a few ideas. Joining us at our virtual roundtable is a welcome guest, founder and director of the New Mexico Black Leadership Council, Catherine McGill. Attorney and Line regular Laura Sanchez is back after a busy legislative session. And another Line regular, principal of the Garrity Group, Tom Garrity, is with us as well. Now, APS said there's no way to avoid COVID cases in a return to school. Indeed, schools from Socorro to Rio Rancho have, and beyond, certainly, have been forced to ease off in-person learning. Tom, does this feel like at all surprising, or like I mentioned earlier, was this to be expected?
Well, this is the first time that any school district in New Mexico has really kind of ramped up in the middle of April. So I think to some degree, I'm willing to cut them a lot of slack. And I think that, there was going to be some expectation that just as we saw some counties slip from green to yellow as far as the county rankings, that there wasn't going to be a perfect science, that just because schools open up that, nobody's going to, catch COVID or test positive for it. So, I think that, it's to be expected. From what I've seen, it's been very sporadic as far as just around the state. There's not like really one concentration in any one school district or area of New Mexico. So I think it's, I think they're doing the best job that they can. And I'm not all that surprised that, just as they ramp up, some schools, just because of things out of their control, had to go back to remote learning.
Mm-hmm. Good point there, Catherine. We got to say this, there are equity questions that must be raised, because we know COVID-19 has hit low-income and minority communities much harder. Is it bound to hit schools in those communities the same way? Should we just deal with that at a fundamental level?
Well, I think we needed to deal with it prior to COVID, and we definitely need to deal with it now as some of those disparities and inequities are exacerbated by the pandemic. And, like Tom said, I have to give a lot of grace to the individuals who are doing, I hope, the best they can, but it's a really tough situation. Kids do need consistency, especially those who are behind in learning. And so I say, for me, like what I keep saying is, how can we be supportive? How can we make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that our children are successful? And also hoping that we will have some good information and transparency. So when things happen, let's figure out how we correct immediately and have some on-the-spot recovery with the kids at the center.
Yeah. Kathy, do you feel like they had a plan going in that, they're executing on now? Do you feel like they have a handle on it?
Well, as they say in the hood, like we were hearing that schools were not going to be back in session, so we got used to that. Right. And then, wait, what? And, they were going to go back to session, and it happened really quickly. And so I think they I'm hoping did the best that they could, but I didn't really see a great tactical plan. Teachers not all immunized before they went back. I think they're up to 70% now, but perhaps that could have happened before. It did not. So what do we do now?
Point there. Hey, Laura, I have to say personally, I was in favor of kids getting back in the classroom after I was opposed to them getting in the classroom because it's clear most students benefit, not just from in-person learning, we know that, but in-person social development. But is there a point where we say, okay, we're just not ready to battle this disease in schools? This is the wrong place to have this sort of experiment kind of play out. And as Kathy mentions, if it would be different if all the teachers were vaccinated beforehand. So I'm curious your thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I just sort of on a personal level, I'm on a board right now. I'm on the governing council of the South Valley Academy, which is a charter school in the South Valley. And, a high proportion of Hispanic students. There's a lot of income disparity in the South Valley. And so we have some very vulnerable populations that are part of our school. And there was a lot of anxiety about going back. And the board meetings that we had, where we had a lot of teachers expressing their frustration about this decision. Of course, it wasn't the school board's decisions to do this, it was the state's. And so there was a lot of just frustration among them. Many of them felt that it was too soon to go back, and especially at the very end of a school year with so little time left in this school year. And they felt that it would have been better to go back and plan during the summer, go back in the fall. But that being said, I really have to give props to the schools, to the teachers, faculty, and parents also to have faith in the system and send their students back, because they're not able, many of those students, unless they're over 16, they're not able to get vaccinated. And a lot of teachers still, many of them have been vaccinated, but some of them have not. And so it's just a very frustrating time right now. A lot of anxiety for folks, but I think that hopefully there is an opportunity for our administration, for the states, the governor and other leaders to take into account what teachers are saying and what parents are saying about their interactions right now as we try this sort of experiment. And I think it's good that we see situations like El Dorado where they're essentially deciding not to, to shut it down after they see some evidence of cases. I think that's the right thing to do. And it's something we should all be prepared to do if we see some outbreaks in other schools.
Tom, we got to get parents in here, certainly, and the impact on them. Look at only a couple of weeks into not having, kids at home. It's got to be a blow to productivity. You think about if you're working from home. There's a lot of things to kind of figure out. Getting your kids back into school for 5 weeks and they're back in home after that, or just 2 weeks in some cases. It's easy to look back, but again, I have to ask, from a parent's point of view, was this the right way to go?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of family units, different types of family units that rely that parents are, really good parents. They're really good, friends to their kids and, running a household, being an employee, and adding in being a teacher or overseeing that teaching process at home places a lot of stress on parents because, they have to do one more thing. So I think that even though it's a month or 2 weeks, whatever that span is, I think that it provides that reprieve for, the family units, for the folks who have been basically taking on all those different roles to basically get a breather and go, okay, now let's get back to normal, at least for a few weeks, collect our thoughts and then, hit the summer and hopefully regain some normalcy. What I also think that this time period has shown us is that just as there are teachers who are really good face-to-face instructors with the classroom, there are some teachers who are much better on Zoom or on a virtual nature, and a lot of students that way as well. So maybe one of the things that will happen in the off season or during the summer is a chance for schools to really kind of pair up the teachers who are good in a virtual setting and get those teachers paired up with students who are really good in a virtual setting. Because the hybrid nature right now of what we're seeing is really, it's a challenge for students who for one reason or another, have to attend class virtually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can imagine that. Well, we're out of time. We'll have to take a quick break, then get political in the 1st Congressional District race when we come back.
And so I think we went in with a lot of really good momentum, but unfortunately, the legislative institution is still relatively conservative when it comes to issues around racial and social justice as well as climate justice. And so
The race is on. Voters in New Mexico's 1st Congressional District will decide on June 1st who should replace Deb Haaland, the former Congresswoman, who's now the Secretary of the Interior, as you know. The seat hasn't been held by a Republican in a decade and a half since Heather Wilson left. The GOP thinks it has their man in Mark Morris, a longtime state senator and a former staffer for Lieutenant Governor Walter Bradley, you might recall. Democrats picked Melanie Stansbury in a runoff election. The state representative and former Washington, D.C. committee staffer nosed out State Senator Antoinette Cedillo-Lopez. Other notable names are independent and former Land Commissioner Aubrey Dunn and Libertarian Chris Manning. We're always in favor of more voices, but Laura, you have to think Mr. Manning, and especially Mr. Dunn, are no help to Mr. Morris, especially. So how do you see the field shaping up with those other names in there?
Well, it's an interesting race. Aubrey Dunn has run a few times not as a Republican, as a, I guess, Libertarian, but he's got strong Republican support, I think, in some parts of the state. So it definitely is no help to Senator Moores. But I think that the district has definitely been trending over since Heather Wilson, Democrat. So I think the Democrat has the edge. But of course, this is an unusual year, as always. We have a lot of interesting things happening, and it's a very short run in terms of the campaign time. So we're talking about 2 months, a little over 2 months, as opposed to all the months that we have usually leading into a cycle like this. So I expect, and I'm not surprised that we're already seeing a lot of ads out there. Not surprised that they're already negative. It's disappointing because I think traditionally you see folks introduce themselves first before they go negative. But I think in this case, given the short timeline, we're already seeing the negative ads out there. But also some fact checking is necessary because there's some allegations about from Mr. Moore's campaign about Melanie Stansbury's alleged lack of support for seniors and Social Security that they are pushing back on for sure. So anyway, I think it's going to end up being, as always with New Mexico, it's an interesting campaign, but I think it will definitely be difficult for Mr. Moores, given Aubrey Dunn and others in the race.
Mm-hmm. Tom, I'm interested in your opinion on that as well. Mr. Moores is certainly got name recognition. He's known quite well within the party. He's on the conservative end of it. Certainly, would that just bode well for him in this go round?
Well, it's all about the base. And,
right.
That's one thing that the Republicans have had a hard time, especially in the 1st Congressional District, as far as getting that vote out. It doesn't help that Aubrey Dunn is in there, as well as a couple of other, folks who, basically, will help to, split that vote, including some libertarians, even though some of the early ads that I've seen with Chris Manning, who's a libertarian, has really been focusing more on pulling that Democratic vote. There's the Democrats, I think, are really solidified with Melanie Stansbury, and it's basically her election right now to lose.
Interesting point there. Kathy, I want to go back to how Ms. Stansbury got the seat in the first place. Russ Contreras pointed out that Ms. Haaland's election was a big deal for the Native American community, certainly, and Georgine Louise didn't poll well among the Central Committee, which selected the candidates. And though Antoinette Cedillo-Lopez won the first round, she lost the runoff. Representation's a very tricky word right now for this cycle. I'm interested in your sense of how this went and how representation kind of came out the other end of the process.
Well, I mean, I'm hearkening back to the fact that I wish we could have had a primary so that we would have an opportunity, all of the voters, to weigh in on who the final candidate was. Their process was certainly contentious, and people were saying that we need somebody who's really going to represent the district, and we need to follow that trend of having a person of color in the seat to take over after Deb Haaland. I guess I would say that what I'm looking for is the person who goes beyond that diversity, equity, and inclusion to humanism, so that my interests are represented whether I'm in the room or not. And what we want to know is what are the policies, what are the positions of the person that's going to be a representative, and are they going to be a representative for everyone, which is why one of the organizations that I work with is doing a candidate forum. Even though we don't have a whole lot of time, we want to hear from the candidates, not have them take that vote for granted. We want to hear from them to say, what are you going to do? We invited everyone. Everyone said that they would be there. Actually, Mr. Morris said that he would be there. They accepted and then withdrew, so we won't get to hear from them about those positions, but we're very interested to know what are you going to do? And the color of your skin, while important, not the most important thing to me.
Can I circle back on the word you used, humanism? I like the way you use that in a sense. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? What are you looking for that sort of expresses that idea of humanism from a candidate?
I would say that I don't have to educate you about the right thing to do and the thing that should be done for the public good, that includes everyone. And it's 2021. It's really time out for us to have to educate people about how to do the right thing in the right way at the right time.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Hey, Laura, I got a question. Let's talk about Ms. Stansbury. Look, she was born and raised in Albuquerque. But she's not the known quantity that Deb Haaland was, certainly, who, let's not forget, was the lieutenant governor candidate and a Democratic Party chair, as you know. But I'm back in this idea where Central Committee was coming from, quote unquote. You got Odette Cedillo Lopez, and then suddenly she just dropped way down here in the runoff. It just, for a lot of folks, it seems like, well, there was not a thread. Folks couldn't make sense of it when it was all said and done. What won it for Ms. Stansbury, in your view, with Central Committee?
Well, Central Committee is definitely the ultimate insider baseball.
It is.
That entire process, and I'm quite familiar with it,
Mm-hmm.
for better or worse. But it definitely is a lot of very staunch Democrats, people who are activists in terms of the party. And I really think that Melanie Stansbury has a lot of energy. She's she's young, she's energetic, she's articulate, and I think people saw in her somebody that they wanted to see representing them in Washington. She was a committee staffer. She has a good background in natural resources, which we have a lot of here in New Mexico, and we definitely want to have a voice that understands the need to protect our natural resources here in New Mexico. And then her time at the legislature has been, while brief, I think it's been impactful. I mean, she has definitely had some good bills that she represented or that she sponsored. For example, she was in my line of work. I work obviously in the utility sector, but she worked on a grid mod bill, grid modernization, which is really big in terms of making sure that New Mexico, goes into the future in terms of its grid reliability, its resilience. Make sure that we have the right technology to be able to use smart meters and integrate into the future in terms of renewable energy. And that's something that she had spearheaded. And so I think that the Democratic Party was looking for that energy. And that's probably what it came down to when all was said and done. It's very difficult to predict when you have so many candidates. And you had, for those of you who watched the legislative session, and this time it was all virtual, it was very interesting to see folks like Antoinette Cedillo Lopez. When she would chair a committee, she was vice chair, but sometimes she would chair the Senate Conservation Committee. And then Melanie, who was a vice chair, also she would chair sometimes. And then you had Georgene Lewis, who was also chair of a committee. And they just have such different styles that I think that really translated well for Melanie. And she ended up, I'm not entirely surprised that she took it. I think she was a very articulate, very energetic person.
Sure. Laura, just real quick in 10 seconds, again, this process question. Kathy made a good point. The voters did not have a chance to get their cut or their say in a primary. Is this the fair way to go to pick something so important?
It is such insider baseball. It's and the thing is that both parties have this process, and it's in state law. So it's not like something that's been baked for a long time. This wasn't something that the party created. think all of us would probably prefer to have more of a say. The outcome might have been very different, but it also would have meant a lot more money raised and spent, and a longer process. So I think it sort of can cut both ways. And, until the legislature decides to change the state laws so that, the voters have more of a say, they will have a say in the election coming up, but in terms of who the candidate was for each party, not so much. So.
Yeah, there you go. We'll have to leave that there. We have one more legislative turn with the line. Just ahead, we're focusing on in-person theater experiences. Theatrical performances have been at a standstill in New Mexico for months as public health orders have forced venues like the Albuquerque Little Theater and Popejoy to halt in-person live performances. We might be seeing a glimmer of light that can be seen at the end of the tunnel, but these prolonged closures have theatrical management and local actors worried about what lies ahead for the industry. NMIF fellow Bryce Dick sat down with Little Theater Executive Director Henry Avery and actor Hazani Olajimi to talk about these concerns and what is being done to keep theater alive in the meantime.
Henry and Hazani, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Henry, the Albuquerque Little Theater hasn't had a live show since last March, which is a long time. Can you give us a little rundown of how the absence of these live performances has affected your theater's income and its staff?
Well, we're proud to say that over 85% of our operational income is from our productions. So we have not had any income from the productions for a year. So that's had a huge impact. But fortunately, we've got some of the PPP money. We've had a little bit of savings. We've done some benefits that have been very lucrative, online shows. We've been producing online, which haven't been a huge source of income, but it's keeping our name out there. But primarily, we've had some incredible support from the community, from our patrons, our followers, people that want to keep this 91-year-old theater alive. So we're very grateful for the support of the community.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you guys are doing virtual performances, and I can assume that's probably not getting the bills paid as much as you would hope. So, and I know you guys are asking for donations as well. But other than that, what are some alternatives the theater has been exploring to help pay some of the bills? Is there anything else?
Well, as I said, we did two online showstopper shows where we did quite well. They were free shows, but we were asking for donations and support. We got it from all over the country. A couple of weeks ago, I did an interview for one of the stations here that went all over the country. We were getting donations from, people in New York and Texas and, all over. So it was really kind of exciting that people do appreciate what this theater has achieved in 91 years and are really determined that we're going to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm. And it's important for our viewers just to point out that the Albuquerque Little Theater is largely community-based, which means the majority of actors are mainly volunteers, right? And they're not paid. And there's a very small staff of paid professionals, right? Yeah.
Well, all of the performers are volunteer their time. Just a small portion of the staff and the design teams and the people like that get a small stipend, but the performers are all volunteer.
And you mentioned you had some luck with some donations coming in. How successful has that been? Is it pretty
successful? Yeah. I mean, as I said, people are very happy to keep us afloat so that we can be here when the pandemic is over and we can get back to doing what we do well, which is the live performances. So we've been very creative. That's what we are. We're creative people in theater, and so we've found the ways with the support of the community. And the PPP money that we were able to get to, we're still here. We're ready to go when we're allowed to reopen.
Great. And Hazani, as an actor yourself, the Albuquerque Little Theater struggled to keep the lights on. Must be a little alarming to you, to say the least. How would the potential closure of any theater in Albuquerque be a hard hit for the acting community here, like you?
Oh, it would be very devastating. Very devastating. I kind of sat up in bed the other night thinking about this as we were talking about it. And I'm grateful for the government support, but icons like Albuquerque Little Theater and other theaters here in this town, it would be very detrimental for us as actors to see them close, because we are family. We might pull each other's hair out and roll our eyes, but at the end of the day, it's about the joy of getting the work done and presenting a show that takes the audience on a journey outside of their ordinary day lives. And for us to not be able to tell that story and to see one of our icons such as ALT close, oh my gosh, that would be disappointing. I will have to learn to knit sweaters and sell them on the street before ALT closes down. Okay.
And Henry, have you heard anything else from other community-based theaters here in Albuquerque? Or other people struggling and organizations struggling?
Everybody's struggling. Some of them, unfortunately, have had to close altogether. They've announced that they will not reopen after the pandemic, which we really hate. Because as Hassani says, we're a big family. I mean, everybody works at all the different theaters. So we're very closely related. So we're really sad to see some of them go by the wayside. Others are still struggling. Some of them are on a hiatus until they can reopen. We have probably the larger staff since we're the largest theater, a 500-seat theater. So we've had to lay off staff. We've had to cut back on salaries, but we've kept as many people together as we can. And the PPP money has helped us, keep our staff. But that to try to reassemble a whole team like we have, if we have to lay everybody off and let everybody go their own ways, that would be really harmful to the future of the theater.
So, and this could be a question for both of you, but I want to start with you, Henry. Do you think the concern is more around the here and now economics of these closures, or do you think this is more of a long-term problem that might affect the theater community post-pandemic?
Well, we know that it's never going to be the same again. I mean, we're going to have to develop some sort of hybrid combination of the future. We hope to get back to live performances, but even when we do, we know that we'll probably have limited audience. We're very concerned for our performers. So being able to do a big cast show with lots of crew and cast and singing and dancing, we probably will not be able to do that immediately, just for safety reasons, for the protection of our volunteers. So we're looking at whatever it's going to be. We will do it, and we'll do it to the best of our ability. But we're all realistic and know that it's probably not going to be the same, not right away. It may evolve back to where we are now, or where we were. But it's a good thing. I mean, life shouldn't be stagnant. It shouldn't change. So we're excited the fact that there may be some new possibilities and some things that we've gotten rather complacent about, and we'll rethink them, and we will grow from them, and we will make it even better.
And what about you, Hassani? What do you think of that?
I'm with Henry. We are probably going to have to start at a limited requirement, and then less distance. I miss everyone, but this is going to be something that we're all going to have to be creative about as well and make it happen. But how small or big the cast is, sign me up,
And Hassani, you told me before this that if someone wants to pursue a career in acting, they have to go to other places to do so, to make money to support themselves. Why is that? What's your experience with that?
Oh, well, here we do a lot of community theater, but if you want to hit Broadway or other major outlets, you would have to probably go further out and seek that opportunity. But one thing I love about community theater is, as I say, it saved my life. Broadway has said this morning on MSNBC that it's the small local theater, community theaters, that is the catalyst that helps the broader span even to Broadway and theater. It's community theater that makes this happen. And so they need us and we need them.
And Henry, so if there's not many opportunities for actors to seek employment for acting here, what can be done to keep our talent here and retain our talent here?
Well, I mean, a lot of the talent, does get trained here and then moves on. I mean, that's what we serve that purpose, to giving them opportunity and training. We have the opportunity to work with professionals in, as directors and choreographers and musical directors. So the local people get a lot of training before they would go off to pursue, advanced careers in theater or education. But we're proud to say that we can make a living in Albuquerque in the arts. For some of the directors and choreographers and teachers and people that are in the design field, we're able to actually pay them money in Albuquerque, and that's really great. I mean, I wish that there was a situation where we could include the actors in that, but the whole premise of community theater is based on the volunteer performers. And that's part of our charter. But the fact that we can have other people that are working in the community to help these people and to train them and make a living, that's very exciting to be able to say that.
Well, and of course, Albuquerque has a large community theater base. I think it's around 50 community theaters are located around the Albuquerque area. So that's very significant.
I've always heard that we had more community theater per capita than any other city in the country. We are very fortunate to have a lot of interested people and a lot of talent here to play with.
Mm-hmm. And we just have around 30 seconds left. Henry, just to send us off, can you tell us the best way to support our local theaters and venues here until live performances come up again?
Well, we're trying to do the online presentation. I know people are tired of sitting in front of a computer and looking at the screen all day because we've been forced to do that. And maybe they're just not quite as interested in watching a show, a play. But that's how you can keep them going, is watch these shows, support the theaters, be aware of what they're doing, and making the contributions, to the theater. And people have been very, as I said, very generous. I cannot complain about the community. We can always grow and use more. But to this date, they've kept us going a year into this. And we probably have another, 9 months probably before we're able to really start getting back to earning money. So we will continue to need their support and their blessings. And we really appreciate it.
Well, Henry and Hassani, thank you so much for talking to us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
In the past week, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham put the finishing touches on both the 2021 regular and special sessions. The governor, of course, signed measures legalizing cannabis and expunging criminal convictions for certain cannabis-related crimes. She also signed the budget and will start with her vetoes, the most notable of which was more than $1 billion worth of spending earmarked for federal funding coming into the state. The governor said she didn't necessarily oppose the way the money was being spent, and the federal money won't disappear with the line item veto, but she said it's not the legislature's money to spend. And she says she has a court decision to back her up on this. I'm so curious your opinion on her position on this.
Well, I think it surprised a lot of people. I'm not sure that anybody, at least, folks who participated in the legislature and do so regularly, anticipated that this was going to be her position. But I do think that, she has a point. The legislature kind of took that federal funding to mean that they had some say in what could be spent. And she really felt that was not the case. And I think if you look at other states, they really have not made it a legislative decision. There's been sort of a directive from the federal government to governors and the administration of each state to do certain things. And so I think that she probably is right in terms of her position, but again, surprising somewhat.
Is it a principle thing, Laura? Is she giving up, a certain amount of emergency power here, by doing this?
No, I don't necessarily think she is. I mean, she's still the head of the state, and she still has a lot of input and say in terms of what gets done in terms of dealing with COVID relief. And I'm not sure that it does sort of erode anything for her. I think that it kind of exacerbates the relationship, though, between the legislature and the governor, which, in some administrations is very tense, and others they have a very, very good working relationship. And I think it ebbs and flows, and certainly for her, this is an example of that.
Good point there, Kathy. The governor also vetoed a bill that would have required police to be trained annually In de-escalation techniques, it would have also changed the composition of an oversight board for police licensing. Now, this passed the legislature unanimously, and we've talked about it here about police reform with you as well. Having maybe missed its moment, did the governor's objection to the licensing part of this, she had an issue with the how. Is that throwing out the baby with the bathwater here?
I was confused by it, but I do understand that what she's saying is that the civilian oversight is really important. And so I agree with that. I think that what's going to happen is that it will be reintroduced in the next session and it'll get passed. Then if they can come to some agreement on having civilian oversight, and I know that that's a trend around the country, is to say that we really have to have some civilians looking at police misconduct so that we can get on the other side and really have some actual new behaviors coming out of police departments that have been so militarized over these past few decades. So I'm surprised that she didn't allow it to go through and then say, but we still need to have more civilian oversight.
Right. And just fix it. Exactly. Hey, Tom, the one thing that might stick around, Zoom access to committee meetings. Speaker Brian Egoff likes the idea, but when you're in a committee room, of course, you know this better than probably all of us, you can tell which voices get heard, which don't. There's a very human, thing going on there. It's harder on Zoom, almost impossible with email content, I got to think, too. Are we trading accessibility for accountability here?
Ooh, great question. There's a certain level of accessibility because anybody can look in, but if you're actually there wanting to provide feedback on some legislation, there's not any real consistency between the committees as far as which, what their rules are, and unless you sign up for some committees the evening before a bill is scheduled to be heard, you're not going to be able to have your voice heard. So, whereas in the legislature, back when we all would meet in person, you would go in and, anybody in favor of the bills, please raise your hand. And then, so there was a chance for that. Now, there were some good things along the lines of using Zoom and doing some grassroots polling, some of the features within that virtual meeting app. And I think that's good. But as far as, people don't have consistent internet access. They don't all have, microphones and standalone cameras to really help to communicate. And as a result, their message gets lost in the lack of technology.
Laura, could you pick up on that, please? Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So I've worked the legislative sessions for years now, and this was definitely a very, very different environment. And I would agree with what Tom's saying. Yes, on the one hand, you were able to, it was a little more convenient in terms of being able to log on as opposed to driving to Santa Fe, dealing with parking, dealing with just the logistics of it all, not to mention the expense of staying up there and all of that. But at the same time, there was definitely a lack of interaction because it was it was passive for legislators. Like they really didn't have to respond to people's requests if they didn't want to. And I, for example, have enjoyed for years a good relationship with my representatives, with my senators and my local rep. And this year, I live in a new location, so I have a new senator, a newly elected senator, and I could not get him to return my emails. I couldn't get him to respond to me, and I heard that from a lot of folks that they don't have to respond to messages, to emails, to texts. As opposed to when you're there physically, it's hard for them to ignore you if you're in their face. Mm-hmm. And so that makes it very frustrating for anybody who is used to being able to develop a relationship with folks. And the other very strange thing about this session is there were a lot of new legislators, a lot of new senators, representatives. This was their first time. And so they did not have the benefit of knowing what it's been like in the past in terms of responsive to constituents. And so for them, I'm concerned that this is going to be their norm. For them, this was what they think is, representing, as opposed to others who have been there for many years. They understand that, like when someone comes to your office, when someone is catching you between committees, talking to you about an issue. And so it's very, I am concerned about sort of the level of involvement we're going to be able to have if we continue to do it through Zoom.
Let me ask Kathy real quick. Mr. Egoff says 6,100 individuals had logged on to House committee hearings via Zoom. Like 6,100. Does he have a point here? That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people, and I think that we also have to be concerned and talk about who are the people who have access, who've had access over all these years, and maybe we need to have some new normative behaviors about how we do things. And because the legislature has been so low tech, they didn't take a deep dive into how to do it really well. I think we're different way of people interacting. And so I think having the Zoom sessions is a good thing, and that it did open it up to people who would have never been in one of those rooms. I think it levels the playing field. I hope it continues, and I hope the legislature does a better job, and that we also hold our representatives accountable to say, you don't get to just not respond to our emails or comments.
That's right. Exactly right. Sorry, a little short on time there. That'll have to do it for the line. We're not done looking at the legislative action, though. Among the issues New Mexico legislators needed to tackle this year were climate change and the environment. But many people, including youth activists, say legislators aren't acting quickly enough on the issues that will affect them most of all. Correspondent Laura Paskus spoke with a legislator about what's left undone. We'll hear that in a few minutes, but we begin with high school student Artemisio Romero E. Carver with Yucca, or Youth United for Climate Crisis Action.
Thank you for joining me today. You were tracking environment bills this session. What passed that you're happy about this year?
Well, some of our biggest, the things we're really glad about in terms of environmental legislation that passed, the bills that crossed the finish line were like SB 84, Community Solar, which is a bill that would increase accessibility of solar energy, especially for low-income communities. And community solar is something that Yucca, our organization, has been calling for about the 2 years that we've existed. So it's really been wonderful to see that passed. Also, Senate Bill 112, or SB 112, the Sustainable Economies Act, and SB 8A, Local Government Air and Quality Regulations, and then House Bill 51, Environmental Database, were some of our kind of like additional bills. I don't want to say that we claim any kind of leadership with that passage, but we were really glad to see those pass.
Yeah. What about bills that did not pass this year that you're disappointed about, and why do you think some of those didn't make it through the session this year?
We saw a lot of important legislation go unscheduled or killed in committees. And we basically saw that oil and gas utility lobby had interests prioritized over the needs of New Mexicans. Proposals that would have reined in extraction or shifted our energy system in significant ways were all killed, including SJR3, the Environmental Rights Amendment, or the Green Amendment, SB 84, Local Choice Energy, SB 86, Use for Oil and Gas Operations, aka Produced Water Regulations. And once I'm done making this list, I'm going to talk to you a little bit specifically about that one. SB 149, Prohibit New Fracking Licenses, HB 50, Private Right of Action for Certain Statutes, and HB 9, Climate Solutions Act. So these are all bills that would have started to do the work to curb carbon emissions in the state of New Mexico and tackle the fact that we have within our borders one of the largest oil fields on the planet, and we have a regulatory obligation to the rest of the planet, right? And those bills were all kind of unceremoniously killed or just never read in committee, despite being filed often far ahead of other bills that were read, right? You can look at the Green Amendment that arrived at Judiciary very early in the session and was never heard while in that committee.
Many youth activists, including with Yucca, and are not eligible to vote, and yet lawmakers, the public, were taking action or not taking action on issues that affect your generation most of all. What do you wish that that lawmakers and the public better understood about climate change and the urgency of New Mexicans acting on climate change, for example?
Yes. So one thing that I'll say in terms of that age gap, I'm 18, I can vote. There's a lot of people who work with me, who know more than me, who are very intelligent people, who are 16 and 17, who know about these issues, can't vote. To remedy that, we actually supported in coalition the 16-vote bill, later changed to the 17-vote bill because it was amended in committee, that would have allowed 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds the right to vote in state elections, right? That's the most immediate solution to that. If you want to respect our interests, give us a chance to represent them in the electoral process. The last time we changed the election age, right, nationally, was in light of the Vietnam War, when you had people being drafted in the military who couldn't vote for the people who were drafting them into the military. That contradiction needed to be resolved. At the same time, right now, you have 16 and 17-year-olds who will experience the single worst damages of climate change, unable to vote on the people choosing whether or not to shorten their lifespans. That's an incredible contradiction that needed to be resolved. It unfortunately wasn't resolved this session, and we'll be back the next time to make sure that it is. Aside from that, aside from just the very simple solution of let us vote, what people I think need to understand, for young people, the scale of the crisis is very large. And I think there were definitely elders in our communities, other folks in our communities who understand it. But even when I talk to people younger than myself, it's even larger for them, right? I'm scared that I may never be able to live past 50, right? There's people 10 years younger than me scared that they're never going to be able to live past 40. The fear becomes deeper and deeper as you get younger because your lifespan gets shorter and shorter. And I think part of what we have to understand is that climate change is not something that can be dealt with soon. It is something that has to be dealt with now, right? We are not looking for, we do not need to be, we talk about goals in the future, right? We talk about carbon neutrality by 2050. We talk about these ideas. And there were bills even in the session that sought to do that. And those are good, valuable things. But I also think that because we talk about these things in big timelines, it becomes easy to comprehend climate change as something that is going to happen and something that will cost. That's not true. It is happening. It has already cost human lives. And action needs to be taken by the time I finish saying this sentence.
Right. I know that it's early to be talking about next session, but what do you hope lawmakers start working on right now ahead of next year's session?
Yeah, I'd really love to see 16 and 17 vote bill. I think we gained some traction this year. I think also what needs to be dealt with is the ways that undemocratically, a lot of bills are killed in committee, right? You can look at what happened in judiciary, where you had literally hundreds of bills in committee. The Green Amendment, one of our primary priority bills, arrived to judiciary early in the session. It wasn't heard, right? Throughout the rest of the session. There was obviously favoritism being played there at the same time that the chair of that committee, received some of the most oil and gas money of any politician in the state. I don't see that as coincidental. It feels just too linear a series of events to be coincidental. That the place where so many environmental bills and other, good bills are being stopgapped is also the committee most controlled by private industry. And so that has nothing to do with democracy. That has nothing to do with votes. That has nothing to do with representation. And it's holding back our democratic electoral process in New Mexico. And work needs to be done by lawmakers and people outside of the lawmaking system to change that. On another level, I think what needs to happen, what needed to happen this session and what needs even more to happen next session is strong regulation of the oil and gas industry. We need to make sure that radioactive waste fluid isn't being considered water in the state of New Mexico. We need to make sure that regulations are put in place that will reduce the amount of carbon emissions out of the Permian Basin in the next 10 to 15 years. That needs to happen now if the human species is going to continue. And the state of New Mexico has an obligation not just to its citizens, but to the entire human race to not continue to be such a massive part of global carbon emissions.
Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate the work that you do.
I'm really glad I could join you too. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk a little bit about this work.
Our conversations continue now with a look at how lawmakers get environmental work done in the next session, which focuses mostly on the budget. State Representative Angelica Rubio says social justice and the environment intersect not just with each other, but with the budget and the state's financial well-being.
Representative Rubio, welcome to New Mexico in Focus. Thank you so much for being with me today to talk about environmental legislation that passed and didn't pass this session. I'm curious to start off, what are the most important environmental bills in your mind that did pass this year?
I think that there was a number of bills, but I was actually really excited. Senate Bill 112 was signed by the governor yesterday, and it creates a sustainable economy task force. And this piece of legislation, while just on the surface is just talks about a task force, there's a lot of really good things inside the bill, which codifies a workforce development study that was conducted by the University of New Mexico and the Department of Workforce Solutions, as well as creating an advisory council that centers frontline workers. And so for me, I believe that we get to reaching climates, we get to address climate issues much quicker when we center them on through an economic lens and how it impacts workers. And I believe Senate Bill 112 starts to do that.
Okay, Any others that you were happy about this session?
Yeah, I mean, I know she signed the solar bill yesterday. The community solar bill. There's quite a number that were signed yesterday related to the environment, and I know that there's a cohort of us legislators who will be getting together this week to start already working on next session and making sure that climate is at the center of our budget legislative session next year.
Are there any other bills that didn't make it through the session this year that you are already talking about bringing back next session?
I mean, I think so. I mean, for me, I wanted this last session to be super transformational. I mean, that was really the purpose of my goal. And for me, transformational meaning, you know, COVID-19, I think we can all agree, unveiled a lot of inequities here in the state. Inequities that I think myself and many others have been talking about for many years through our organizing work around the state. And so I think we went in with a lot of really good momentum, but unfortunately, the legislative institution is still relatively conservative when it comes to issues around racial and social justice, as well as climate justice. And so I think that for those of my colleagues in the House, we are determined. I still have issues with just fundamentally how our legislature doesn't get to do as much work during the year as I think we should. And so my hope is that with whatever efforts we can make between now and July, when the budget talks start to really pick up, that we can make a lot of this climate and environmental work a priority.
Curious, since you were first elected, social justice issues and environmental issues, you've really been ahead of the curve on both of those. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the intersection of those two issues and why they're so important for New Mexicans?
Yeah, so one, thank you for that question, because I think that we as a state have missed the mark in a lot of ways in previous years, because many of these movements, as important as they are, were very siloed. And I think I was just having this conversation earlier with someone around the Outdoor Equity Fund, which passed the legislature back in 2019 and was a part of the creation of the Division of Outdoor Recreation, is that there was so much mobilization around that piece of legislation that so much of that momentum carried on. And so you had environmental groups this past year working just as fiercely as ever on economic and social issues that were important to many of the organizations that were working on other issues like paid sick leave or anything related to early childhood development. And so I think it's really exciting for me being a legislator in the course of the last 4 years, that so much of my work that I've been doing as an organizer has now really sort of infiltrated into the legislature and has really created this intersectionality that I think even legislators are really starting to recognize.
As you mentioned, next year's session is focused on the budget. How does climate change, oil and gas industry, how do all these issues tie into the budget, and what legislation might we be looking at next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the question that I think a lot of us are going to be really navigating over the course of the next few months, because as many of your viewers know, oil and gas is predominantly part of the revenues that come into our state. And so there are many of us who've been working on ideas around economic diversification and what that looks like for our state. And I know that we just passed the legalization of recreational cannabis. We have an outdoor economy that's really starting to pick up. And I think for many others, I think that's why the Senate Bill 112 was so critical, because it allows for us to reimagine a completely different revenue sources for the state, so that we can think about other opportunities. And so I think that's also going to be a challenge moving into the session next year, that it depends on where oil and gas revenues are between now and July, and then again in December, and then again in January when we start up again, because we have sort of perpetuated this cycle of dependence on this industry. And while it's been very good to our state, it actually doesn't allow us to plan ahead. And so my hope is that as we begin to develop and really diversify our economy, that we sort of push back on this narrative that that while we might be in terms of economics not have as many resources as other states, that we actually can build a new vision for New Mexico, and we have to do that without relying so heavily on one industry, and really letting frontline workers and communities really create these opportunities for that imagination and for those ideas. And so for the budget next year, it'll certainly be interesting. And I think we're just going to have to be very strategic on how we prioritize climate while still navigating that income source.
Representative Rubio, thanks for joining me on New Mexico in Focus, and thank you for your service to our state.
No, thank you.
Retirement, family, lifestyle, job. Those are the top 4 reasons to move to New Mexico, found in the United Van Line's 2020 National Movers Survey, their annual analysis of inbound moves to outbound moves for each state. Now, our results show 30% of those who moved here in 2020 checked off retirement. Just look out the window any random day and you know why. It's beautiful here. Now, the numbers reflected with over 50% of those who moved here in 2020 above the age of 65. But you know who didn't move here in 2020? People between 18 and 44, only 12%. In that sweet spot age group every city is fighting for, that 35 to 44 age group shows just 9% moved here compared to 18% leaving New Mexico in 2020. That 35 to 44 age group is that life and career window when a lot of us step out to invest in businesses and companies. People are climbing to their peak earning years by entering the C-suite at work. They churn the housing market, all the rest. We're just not getting our share, and that's a long-term problem. Now look, there's nothing wrong with retiring here, but we'd be foolish to see these 2020 numbers as a pandemic-driven fluke. With 35% of us leaving because of employment, it's not an age thing, it's a jobs thing. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and viewers like you.